You're listening to the Purdue Commercial AgCast. I'm Todd Kuethe, professor here in the Department of Agricultural Economics, part of the CCA, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Chad Fiechter, also a professor of agricultural economics.
We go around and have a bunch of conversations with people to try to understand the ag economy or understand ag's role in the broader economy. We've had a lot of conversations with people. We get to ask them questions. Doing this podcast gives them an excuse to say yes to us asking these questions, but it's also nice for us because we get to learn a bunch. And we thought the kind of audience we have, they also like to learn. That's why we also release them, right?
Yep.
You're about to listen to a colleague of ours, Joe Balagtas. And Chad, why don't you just tell us again how we broke our only rule we made for this podcast?
Okay, so the rule that Todd's referencing is that we weren't going to talk to other academics. We wanted this to be a conversation with people who have experiences different than ours. However, Joe's had a very unique experience, and that is he worked for the Council of Economic Advisors for the White House during
basically the end of the first Trump term. He was gone before Biden was sworn in.
That's right.
But it was in that interim time. He worked for the Council of Economic Advisors is a group that does research and information to benefit the president. So a lot of it is evaluating policy proposals, or if the administration has a question about what's going on in whatever sort of sector of the economy.
Yeah.
And they have different experts for different areas. And Joe covered agriculture. Sort of like a conversation we had with Nate Kaufman from the Kansas City
you're
Fed,
right.
How the Federal Reserve kind of always has a couple of ag people around so they can understand how it fits into everything else or how the ag sector works, right? So the Council of Economic Advisors similarly almost always has an ag person. Purdue was kind enough to give him a little space to go do that for a year. It's nice because he brings all this experience and information back. Plus he represents us there, right? And gets to meet some really interesting and talented people that are experts in other areas. But we wanted to sit down with Joe because we wanted to learn, how does the White House actually work from your perspective, somebody that works in it, when it relates to the agriculture sector and economic policy. So similarly, we had a conversation with Matt Erickson, and the Matt and Nate ones, you can go back and listen. They're up already. We had a conversation with Matt Erickson. What is an ag person like on the Hill trying to pass legislation? How does an ag committee work? We were like, oh, we should get similar talk to Joe. We would not have found out as much as we would like to know about Joe's time in Washington without it being like, help us learn for this podcast.
But I think that this is symbiotic. Like, we're using the audience of, we think 2, 3, to have conversations with people like Joe.
Yeah. And we started this with one listener.
We did.
Now we're up to two, three. We might have 6 by the end of this Joe episode. It's that good that we could double our audience. I think you should definitely enjoy it. Listen, tell your friends and colleagues, spread it around. If you like the conversation, if you've liked what we do with our time here, if you find it enjoyable at all, go back, listen to the other ones. Also, we got more lined up. We got a whole fall schedule of people we're hoping to interview and get some information out there. Today, introduce yourself for us. Say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. I'm Joe Balagtas.
We have a tradition that sometimes works on this podcast. So our audience is driving a combine or a tractor. Maybe they're just driving in a car and they're imagining this conversation in their minds. So Chad and I, in our first podcast, we mentioned that Chad's been told he looks like
Lorenzo Lamas.
Yes, Lorenzo Lamas, a young Lorenzo Lamas, not a current.
It was also, my hair was a little bit longer, and I think it was driven by that.
Yeah, we'll see what you get now with a little bit shorter hair. I was told I looked like comedian Tom Segura.
I always thought you looked a little bit like, and I'm going to draw a blank on his name. Who is the actor? He was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Dreyfuss?
Richard Dreyfuss?
Wow. That's awesome.
I think you posted a picture of you and your family, and I commented that I didn't know Catherine was married to Richard Dreyfuss.
I'll take it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I'm going to use that one from now on. I've been told I look like Richard Dreyfuss. So, Joe, for our listeners picturing this conversation, tell them a little bit, what celebrity have you been told you look like so we can picture that in our minds?
I've been here, 20 years now. And this is early in my career at Purdue. I went to the co-rec to work out. As I was walking out, there's a group of high school volleyball players. There's a high school volleyball tournament. And as I walked through the door, through this group of kids, I heard over my shoulder somebody say, and this is going to date me a little bit, the student said, "Hey, look, it's Yao Ming." I thought it was both offensive and hilarious at the same time.
It's both of those, mostly because you do not look like Yao Ming in any way. One, you're not 7 feet tall.
I'm not 7
Two,
feet tall.
you're not famously a Chinese basketball player
No.
of any height. I'm also impressed that it was high school students. I would have said elementary for you to look like you look more like Yao Ming, the shorter the person
right.
observing
That's
you
true.
is. But if they were like roughly your height,
Yeah.
then
Were you
anyway.
on a hill?
No, I was just
Okay.
walking out
All
the
right.
door.
Were you the top half of two people in a trench coat looking like a... Anyway, I think we've gone as far as we can with that one. We should talk about what we came to talk about.
Yes.
So the reason, Joe, we invited you to come in is you had an interesting role for a year as an ag economist. You worked at the Council of Economic Advisors, which is part of the White House. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So summer of 2019, I went on leave from my job here at Purdue to work at the CEA, Council of Economic Advisors in DC. Basically, Purdue loaned me to the Council of Economic Advisors. I was there for 18 months working on agriculture and trade and a bunch of others.
Okay, so we'll take a step back. You work for the president, right? So it's in the White House.
Correct. So the Council of Economic Advisors was created, or I think it was 47, just after World War II, to be economic consulting agency for the White House.
And about how many economists are there for the Council of Economic Advisors?
So the council itself is typically 3 people, a chair and 2 other members of the council. Under those 3, there's maybe 10 to 12 senior economists. I was a senior economist that covered the span of the global economy. And then there's probably 20 junior economists and interns that do almost all the work. So the Council of Economic Advisors is in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, the EEOB, which is, to me, a French-looking building right next to the White House, directly west of the White House, on the White House campus. And that was amazing, right? Just going through White House security every day on my way to work, right? And then
Did you go every day?
in the office. Oh, yeah. In the office every day, even through most of the pandemic. I think we were the last people working in person
Seriously?
in June of 2020 at the height of COVID. I could walk down. I lived near Chinatown, which is a mile east of the White House. I could walk down the middle of the street all the way to work. Nobody else was there. It was deserted because of COVID. And we were in person. Yeah.
So anybody's listening at home that is not familiar with the Eisenhower building, I would encourage them to go on Google image search. It's my favorite building in DC. At least I've never been on the inside, but the outside. The best looking building in all of DC.
It's beautiful. I don't know how to describe. I'm not an architecture guy. How would you describe it? It looks sort of French-ish.
Old timey and formal and beautiful. It looks like it should have beautiful gardens all around, like almost a palace in a way. I think it's a more attractive building than the White House.
Is any part of visualizing the West Wing, the show West Wing, appropriate for where you worked?
So the West Wing is the part of the White House closer to the Executive Office Building. It's separated by the West Wing and the EEOB are separated by a driveway, essentially. And there are people shuttling back and forth that driveway into the West Wing on the regular.
So tell us a little bit, how did you end up working at CEA? What was the path that how did you get that opportunity?
So let's talk about what the CEA does, right? So the CEA...
Joe, you should host this
The
podcast.
CEA provides information on the economy to the president, right? And it was created to be staffed by government economists on leave from places like the USDA or
Department of Energy or
et cetera, right? Bureau of Labor Statistics, Treasury,
Commerce.
and then also from academia. Academic economists, experts in particular fields who go and give their time to the White House to make sure that the president is making decisions with the best information possible.
And you were there as an agricultural economist.
So you only have 10 senior economists covering the economy. Most of them are experts in their field, labor, trade, et cetera. Agriculture is a tiny part of the U.S. economy. So if you're only going to pick 10 economists to cover the whole economy, you might think, oh, maybe don't pick an agricultural economist. but it's so specialized, right? You need someone to cover agriculture that knows the institutions. So there's typically an ag economist on that staff. Not always, but typically.
That was my experience. Like when I worked at the USDA, right, we had people frequently that would do spells in CEA.
Yeah.
Because particularly, like, I think it's seasonal, right? So like if there's challenges related to food or agricultural production or something, that it gets more incentivized to have somebody with that specialization there.
And are you typically, you were there 18 months?
I was there. It was a 12-month appointment that extended for another 6 months at the end of the first Trump administration.
So you were so good that they were like, we can't let Joe leave now. We need him at least another half a term.
That's what I like to tell myself.
Did you think of yourself working for the president? Like, because you spanned two. So did you think of yourself?
You're in the White House, the political building, right? Everybody in there is political. Almost everybody there is on team Trump or on team Biden or on team of whoever the president is. And that's just how the White House works by design. I wasn't really on team Trump. I wasn't on team anybody. I'm an economist and I don't have strong policy positions. I just do analysis. So when I was invited, the first conversation I had with the chief of staff was, well, I'm really not on board any particular policy. Is that a problem? And she said, absolutely not. We want people to provide objective facts, information, knowledge from the literature. So the president has that, right? And as long as you're not like out there, marching against the president, we're good.
This is not totally, but that's objectively what it's supposed to be doing, is to be an objective analysis of the economy to provide information to the president.
That's how the CEA is designed. Now, of course, people who have strong political leanings might not be willing to work for the president who's espousing parties that they don't policies that they don't agree with, right? So Republican presidents tend to have conservative leaning economists on the CEA. Democratic presidents tend to have liberal leaning economists on the CEA and so on.
Okay.
But the CEA really does stand out in the White House as relatively non-political.
Okay.
And that's both, again, by design, it's a strength, but it's also a weakness. So everybody else in the White House has strong policy positions that they're pushing for. And the economist is the nerd in the building saying, well, actually, right? Okay. It makes you really unpopular.
I mean, do you kind of feel like that? Like you're a little bit of like,
oh, absolutely.
If they see you out there like, yeah.
Yeah, right, let's not invite that guy to the meeting.
And then the things that the CEA does, one of the things I know is that there's the annual, the economic report of the president.
Correct.
So you would contribute some section of that report that's under your purview or expertise, right?
Yeah, correct.
Were you there when they did when it was the superhero report? Do you know what I'm talking about? So this is what a nerd I am. So I sometimes read this, but there was like a year when they had all these thank yous and they thanked all the interns and then they listed the non-superhero name of various superheroes. So it'd be like, we're thanking Clark Kent. And
I think one of the ERPs, they're called, one of the ERPs had some of those Easter eggs in them for people to find. But you got to be a nerd economist to be reading those thank yous. So you just told on yourself, Todd.
That's what we're here for. That's my role in this podcast team. Chad is Lorenzo Lamas. I'm the nerd, Dreyfus. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how you got to be on the CEA. How did you end up with this job?
The idea is you need someone with specialty in agriculture to be there. It's a relatively small world of us ag economists that work on policy, who you could draw from. And somebody in their Rolodex had my name, right? And so, in fact, I had an agreement with Rob Johansson, who was chief economist at USDA at the time. He said, hey, we have an interest in having you in the CEA.
So presumably they would have called Rob Johansson an ag economist, and he would have thought of, here's 3 to 5 people that I think would be a good fit or something, right?
Yeah, correct.
And then you're in that set.
Correct.
Done policy work and stuff.
The connection was actually 1 degree of separation apart from Rob. So Rob actually called Jason, and I don't know if he asked Jason, Jason Musk,
who was our department head
at the time. I don't know if he asked Jason and Jason said no, or if he asked Jason for names and Jason gave him my name. But either way, I should think Jason.
You apply for like a regular job? Like you had to write a cover letter and give your resume or what we call CV?
Yeah, there are interviews. This is a pretty informal interview. The chief of staff, DJ Nordquist at the time, called me up once we realized that there was interest on both sides. She called me. There's a 30-minute interview. They had my CV, and I was hired.
For everybody who doesn't know our world, largely we're just judged based on a piece of paper that lists out our accomplishments around academic outputs, right? So you're a known commodity. It's not like you're just bumbling around.
You've written some papers that cover topics that the council would care about, or maybe given speeches to groups that the council are trying to reach, or you interact with the stakeholders that they would value, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. It's an honor to be asked and to serve on the CEA. It's a feather in the cap of Purdue for me to do it. That's why Jason and the dean at the time, Karen Plout, were happy to let me, they granted me leave.
Oh, yeah, like the rest of us would have extra classes to teach.
You guys picked up the slack while I was gone. So thank you for that.
So you're the ag economist of this group of like 10 to 12. You said 10, right? 10 economists?
Yeah,
10.
ish.
So these other people are also economists, but you don't know them. Like you're showing up first day of work to like meet these other economists who are, on paper at least, also expertise in their area, right? What was that like compared to working with just ag economists? Like the people, like you're used to work where we all care about this subject matter, and now you're maybe the only one that does. What was that like?
Well, so it's a little bit intimidating because there are a lot of smart people in the White House in general, not just the CEO. A lot of really smart, high energy driven people in the White House, a lot of people who know how government works. You know, and I walk in there as an academic and I really don't know how government works.
Well, you do know how like committees and emails work. That's the thing that academics learn, right? Like, oh, here's how you schedule meetings.
We're pretty good at that. Turns out we're not very good at that, right? I learned at CEA. But yeah, it's a little intimidating. It turns out people are, you know, it's a small group. People have to work together well. One thing about CEA, very different from our scholarly work, we publish stuff without our names on it, right? So it's really team effort, right? Everything that goes out is the White House, right? And not Joe Balagtas for the White House.
So if you did all the analysis, wrote all the words, your name's not going to show up. This is not the job for someone who wants individual glory.
Not really. There's individual glory that you build a reputation and say, oh yeah, remember Todd, he did this, and let's bring him in as secretary in the next administration. Something like that.
Joe teasing his next
No, not that.
But is that a thing though? Is that like, are there politically motivated economists who that would be one of the reasons you would want to be on CEA?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. And so there are people at CEA right now, or in the White House right now, who had a job in the first Trump administration, right? Who now have a better job in the Trump administration because they were there and they were good they're team players, they're productive, right? And they proved their worth and they're...
What would be a better job?
Then I think that's subjective, right? So I honestly, for a year and a half, it was great work. I wouldn't want to make a career out of it. It's really stressful. It's very different than the type of work we do here in academia. I loved it while I was there. I was very glad to come back to Purdue.
So let's get to our listener, the person's favorite part of the podcast. Walk us through a day. You walk the empty streets from your apartment to the
post-apocalyptic streets of DC.
No, they were apocalyptic.
That was
not post yet. They were still apocalyptic when we started. So first of all, what time are you going in?
Pretty flexible, 8-ish. I'd be in. Every now and then there'd be an early meeting and I'd go in earlier, but it's more regular. Hours were more regular than I hold here at Purdue.
What's a typical day look like? How do you spend your day?
Yeah, so at any given moment, any given day, I might have 3 or 4 projects that I'm working on. Some of them are regular, right? So I was in charge of the industrial production and utilization report, monthly report that comes out of the Fed. And whenever that came out, we would get a early peek at it, 24 hours before it was released. I'd write a memo with my team and send that to the president so he knows what the news is going to be the next day.
This is probably the big takeaway, and this is how various people are going to react to that information.
That's right. Memo, like, 2 or 3 bullets, right? Here's what you need to know, Mr. President, about industrial production in the country over the last month.
Do you think the president read it, or somebody who works for the president? Like, who are you writing this for?
So that report was written for the president and anyone else who would be in the Oval Office with him when it was shared with him. Okay. Right? Did he read it? I don't know. Maybe, I think somebody before the president decides what's newsworthy and what's important for him to read.
Someone in the filter of, because he's going to get these things handed to him all day long.
Right. If there's some big breaking news in industrial production, that memo might come across his desk.
Or you in a group. So like, there's some portion of your day then where you're like just reading in isolation at your desk, right?
That's right.
But then there's some part where you're going to get together with your colleagues and say like, here was my take on this. Here's what jumped out to me, right? So it's a mix of sort of like monastic alone time, consuming information.
Correct.
And then breaking it down with other people.
Yep. And for those regular reports, I'd be the lead. I'd read the industrial production report. I'd draft a memo, like bullets. I'd give it to a junior economist, Troy Dury in this case. Think of junior economists as really bright, early 20-something people that drive Washington, D.C. They might have a master's degree in statistics, but probably like international relations or public policy or something like that.
The best description I ever heard about D.C. was from Brian Williams, who started his career in D.C., and he said it's a town full of earnest, former student council presidents driving Honda Accords.
Yeah.
Right. And that's who runs a lot of the actual groundwork in Washington, from the Senate to the White House to the agencies, even the political parties themselves. I'm bright. I'm going to work. Matt Erickson, biggest guest on the podcast, did a little time in that kind of world.
Right. Troy would draft the memo. It would come back to me, and I'd say, yep, that looks good. Let's send it on.
And then did you present any of the stuff like verbally, not just in writing? Like, would you go in and brief the president or a team of people?
I never briefed the president. Mostly I would brief the chair or one of the members, and either the chair or the member would go to the Oval Office and present the work to the president.
If you were politically motivated and you wanted to work for a president, would that be sort of a next natural step? You were a senior economist in the previous administration, and now it just makes sense for you to move into this chair because you have more. Do you have more influence as the chair?
Oh, absolutely. Maybe the current chairs or the recent chairs that I could think of, some of them worked in CEA as senior economists. Right?
Okay.
Here's an example of someone who I know that was a chair, is Austin Goolsbee, who's the president of the Chicago Fed, right?
Yep.
Correct.
And so he has that experience. He brings that experience to the Fed and thinking about how they interact with policies.
Tom Phillipson was chair towards the end of my time, or in the middle of my time at the CEA. He started as a senior economist and then was promoted to chair.
Who's doing the promoting?
Yeah, probably White House chief of staff and other people close to the president.
So if you make the president unhappy with your take on industrial production in the United States, can he be like, whoever wrote this, get rid of him?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that. When I was there, I wouldn't think so, right? I don't think people were afraid to disagree or to provide views that might be seen as unpopular. I think that was fine. You know, one thing we worked on, getting back to tasks, starting pretty much the whole time I was there, we were working on trade, in particular trade with China. I arrived summer 2019, so the trade war was already on. And we spent a lot of time working on moving towards a trade agreement with China.
Got it.
Right? And so CEA was producing a lot of work showing that uncertainty around trade policy uncertainty was really costly for the U.S. and that an agreement that gets rid of that uncertainty would be a good thing. And that was unpopular, right, among certain people in the White House.
Now, did you have access to much information that you could not access now as a professor? Or were you basically looking at around the same sources of data, same reports?
Yeah, no, there's data there at the CEA that I can't get anywhere close to. One is we got early access, early peeks at official reports, right? So, you know, before the BLS monthly labor report comes out, we see that 12 hours before it comes out.
Are you at a rush of like, I got to get everything I can out of this in the next 12 hours?
Yeah, so you got to be really careful, right? You have access to incredible data and some of it's sensitive, and you just got to be really careful how you handle it. There's all kinds of, people respond, right? If I send an email from my White House email address to USDA, you get immediate answers. People in private sector respond during the, when the COVID pandemic kind of blossomed in spring 2020, credit card companies and other companies tracking economic activity just gave their data to the White House, right?
Seriously.
To help the White House figure out what the heck was going on.
Because one of the problems, when we talked about this with Nate Kaufman on, who works at the Federal Reserve, there's a lot of good economic data, but it can come in kind of slow or late. Like things are collected through surveys.
Yeah.
You get people's observations, but then you got to process that. It take a while. But with credit cards, you can maybe get close to instantaneous. Yeah. Oh, people are going, like you were there at COVID, right? So people are going back to restaurants because the number of like sit-down restaurant receipts is like doubled.
Exactly.
Another question is that, like, how do we know if you're doing a good job? How are you evaluated being good at being a CA economist? Like, what determines that, or who determines that?
The members will let you know, right? If you're being useful, and they might let you know verbally, like, Joe, get on board. And I think I was told this once or twice by the chair.
Meaning, like, we need more out of you. We need different things out of you. What were they meaning?
So I didn't love how some of the phase one trade agreement was coming together. I voiced my opinion. I said, I'm not sure that's a great way to do it. And I was told, get on board.
Okay.
This is happening. We want you to measure what's going to happen.
Yeah, but they listened, right? They said,
Sure.
yeah, we were taking that into consideration. Thank you very much.
So you're spending your day reading, writing, thinking about the economy. How long is your day? Are you there? Do you leave at 5? Are you there in the evenings? Is this like a lot of time?
It's a lot of time, right? So I learned really early that you never leave your White House phone behind. So I went for a run on a Saturday morning, like 2 or 3 weeks into my stint at CEA, and I came back and my phone had blown up. And they're like, Joe, where are you? We need you in the White House right now, right? So you're kind of always on call. And there are plenty of days when I went home at 5 p.m. So it's kind of real.
Were you coming in sometimes Saturdays, Sundays?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting. That's definitely not your typical professor.
The pace of life is so different than our university jobs.
So you didn't have meetings to plan a meeting for when you would have your meeting?
No.
Whatever kind of thing.
No. Things are real. Yeah.
We're going to do this next fall.
Yeah,
Let's get together in April to figure out when we should meet summer to do this fall thing.
There's this sense, at least here, I think in general, but certainly those of us who think about how government works and government policy, there's this caricature of really inefficient government. The White House is anything but efficient. The people there are really busy and they move quickly and they're not inefficient, right? There are no meetings without an agenda. And if we're done with the agenda items, 30 minutes later, let's close shop and go back to work.
I think what Joe's trying to say is this podcast would not fly.
No.
And the White House.
Definitely not.
This is productive activity. I don't know.
Wait, can we go back? Because I had a question that I've been holding on to. So you wrote these memos. Can you think of a time when something you wrote, like you heard later? Like, do you have any examples of like?
You could clearly tell that the White House had consumed what you had put out.
I think the signing of the phase one trade agreement was a win for the CEA in the sense that we're focused on trade policy uncertainty, right? There's a study from the Fed that said trade policy uncertainty knocked a point off of GDP in 2019.
Wow.
That's a big, really costly. And so getting that agreement was, I'm not claiming credit for it.
But at least,
the CEA was really pushing for an agreement.
When that happens, are you like, there's not a lot of moments in our jobs. There's a few moments, right? Papers get accepted, students do well, right? Where it's like, oh, that's nice. That feels nice. Like, is that what you feel whenever the agreement gets signed? You're like, that was good.
Yeah, was there ever a desire to like pop champagne with the colleagues? We got it.
Yeah, no, I think, and that was one of them. Maybe a couple others that I can't talk about.
Yeah. Back to you, Todd.
The tasks and things you're working on, thinking about it as being a professor, how many of those things are sort of like predictable flow? Like you kind of know that report's going to come out some time? And so there's like that kind of, and how much of it is just like you're putting out the fire of the day?
So there's this regular rhythm, that's a good point, of monthly reports, the annual report, the economic report of the president, that's got a regular schedule, medium-term projects that you might be working on, regulatory review, that's all pretty predictable. On any given day, you're going to get a call that says, Joe, we're working on this food box program, and we need to know what the economic impact is or what demand for, what the rate of food insecurity is in Florida and how this might affect that. And we need the answer by 5 p.m. Tuesday or tomorrow. That stuff could fill up quite a bit of your day.
So I wasn't able to go visit Joe while he was there because it was COVID. But there would be times where I said, like, hey, Joe, I want to visit you. You'd say, like, don't come this week. This other week might be better. Or something, right?
Yeah.
Predict it a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. I know I agreed to host you for a West Wing tour, Todd, but there's this crisis and we need to find PPE, fix PPE, supply chains so that hospitals have rubber gloves, right? And I just can't get away. So sorry.
See you later.
So it's hard to envision a world where economists are so valuable and needed in a crisis, like relative to like firefighters. So when you went on the run and your phone's blowing up, like, can you give an example of like, what is it that they need you for so desperately that there's a problem with you being out and away from your phone?
We weren't saving lives so much. Most of the crises are more internal, like the president is traveling to North Carolina and, 36 hours before his trip, a hurricane blows through, then wipes out a bunch of agriculture in North Carolina or in Virginia. Give us 4 bullet points that the president has to know when he visits North Carolina about agriculture in North Carolina.
So he's not showing up and be like, you've ruined a lot of orange groves here in North Carolina.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you can be informed as to what the problem is.
That's helpful.
And then COVID created different types of
Actual crises.
Yeah, those were external crises.
There's rumors of a new wave or something. And then you're like, well, we got to get some analysis of this on that. We can't wait till next week.
Correct.
But it is, I don't know why that's interesting to me, but it's interesting to me that there could be like these crisis-driven research.
You guys and I, we do research with a really long time horizon. And some of us work on papers that take years from inception to publication or decades.
We also tend to study things that have happened. So what was the effect of this farm bill on this group of farmers? What you do, you see in is like, this could happen. If this happened, what's going to happen?
Or we're just figuring out what the extent of COVID the pandemic means. And there's a bunch of strawberry growers in Florida who suddenly have to plow up fields or something, right?
Man, you were there a weird time.
It was a crazy time. Trade for sure was crazy. And then COVID was, that's the other thing about CEA. So because it's a small group and we have to span the whole economy, I was working on a lot of stuff that wasn't agriculture, working on PPE supply chains, the economics of PPE supply chains and so on.
Is there a part of you that wants to go back sometime when it's boring? Like, then you got a similar call from the future chief economist who's like, Joe, right now there's nothing going on. Can you come just hang out? And
The excitement is certainly one of the perks of it, right? It was a really good change of pace for me, 15 or 18 years into my academic career.
And then the other question that we ask everybody is to talk about what sort of constrains you or what like limits the CEA from being as good as it could. Like, is it just literally like, I wish we had 6 more people here, or I wish our days were an hour longer, or there's some piece of the economy I wish we could actually measure better than what limits your ability to be?
Yeah, more brains, more people is always better. But again, it's only 10, so that you work with what you got. I don't know. I'm looking at this current White House, wondering if the focus on loyalty, one important job of the CEA and others in the White House is to say, you know what, this isn't a great idea, or here are the costs of this thing, right, that you're proposing. And for any president, getting that information is important. They might disregard it, right? We're not politicians. There's lots of good reasons why somebody might pursue a policy that have nothing to do with cost-benefit analysis. as we economists do it, right? But it's important for them to have that information so that they're aware of the cost of it when they say, no, look, I'm going to pursue this policy because, I need a vote from Senator so-and-so from Alaska.
Yep.
Talk about CEA, but are there similar other groups at the White House, like in terms of, are they getting advice from non-economists? Like, is there a science policy council or they're just basically CEA?
There is a science policy council. It's called Office of Science and Technology Policy. There was a Purdue colleague at OSTP when I was there. On the economy, there's also the National Economic Council, which is really the driver of economic policy. Kevin Hassett's now the chair of NEC. He was chair of CEA, and he was rolling out just as I got there. They're more political.
So you guys were kind of the nerds that would crunch the numbers behind policy decisions, not necessarily as much like advocating particular.
We were not advocates, correct. And again, that's by design and that's a feature. It's a bug if you want to be popular, right? And if you want to have power, right? If you're not a cheerleader, then
like it sounds like me or Chad should be the National Economic Council because we want to be cool and popular.
Do you guys have strong policy positions?
We do. The more mundane the policy is, the more I have. Like I've got a lot of opinions right now about parent-teacher organizations. Schools. I at times in my life really cared about how you allocate intramural fields among club sports. Basically, the more mundane and small it is, the more it's like I'm going to call out procedure. But like what we should do about international conflict among other countries, I don't have a lot of opinion.
Part of me, while I was there, wished I had had my own strong policy positions that I could advocate for. And I saw some of my colleagues do a little bit of that. There's one guy, Stephen Braun, who is at CEA now. He's been at CEA, I think, since Bill Clinton's first term.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
And he's the lead macro forecaster for CEA and a huge piece of White House economic information, right?
So he has been at CA longer than you have studied economics at all.
Through Republican and Democrat presidents, and it just has a lot of wisdom. I once heard him tell the cautionary tale of a CEA economist who wants to advocate. And he was talking to a high school group that was touring the CEA. He said, the CEA is the nerdy kid at the lunchroom. And that's our role, and that's what we do best. And every once in a while, one of those nerdy kids will try to be a popular kid, right? And it works for a little while, but it always turns bad, right? He always ends up bad for that kid, and maybe for the other nerds as well.
Well, because also you live here in town. So you lived 18 months away and you were working kind of like insane hours.
Pretty insane hours. It was interesting. So I have 3 sons. That fall of 2019, my oldest son was starting his senior year in high school, another one in high school, and then a younger one. The high schoolers did not want to move. So Arlene, my wife, stayed with the boys here in West Lafayette. And I originally thought, well, I'll just go find an apartment and I'll shuttle back and forth every other weekend. That turned out to be a lot of travel. So I ended up to be more like every month-ish or so I'd come back. In a way, I ended up having more time for myself, even though I was really busy because I didn't have a wife and kids waiting for me at home.
You could also like, I'm going to push dinner back 45 minutes.
And nobody,
Yeah, right.
I would have to be like, oh, but then there's this practice. You got to get practice. You got to eat
I
now.
didn't have to shuttle anybody to practice.
They're setting you up for the potential to be like, wow, thanks for your service, Joe. You really did us a service. And then you flipped it around. And now but our listener is not impressed.
Maybe they're like, now I need to get a job in
CEA.
you know, meet time.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, Chad, is right now with a bunch of little kids in the house would be a great time for you to leave and spend a year in Washington, D.C.
You said on a Saturday morning run, and I was like, get away from my phone. That's usually not what I'm worried about.
Oh.
We've exhausted Joe pretty well.
We have.
So we always wrap up with some lightning questions, some quick answers. So these will be like, we got to get just your very simple. So I'll start with the classic one. When you're working at the White House gets a time machine that you can only use for professional purposes. You can't use it for recreation. It's just to make you better at being a CEA economist. When are you going to with your time machine?
Ooh. Maybe the farm crisis, early 80s? That'd be a fun time to be working on agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you can go back and
Man, good answer. That's at least in my top 20 answers.
you got a report coming out. They're calling you in. You're working extra hours, but you're getting hungry. What are you going to eat? Where are you going to go grab something real quick?
The White House is on this island. There's not a lot of great retail close to the White House, right? Walking across the street takes 30 minutes because you have to leave the building and go through security to get back in and so on. So it's a little bit of a hassle.
And you probably can't just order like Grubhub to like bring something to your desk.
They don't really deliver. There's a mess hall in the bottom,
Okay.
in the basement of the executive office building that had just okay stuff. DC has these lunch places, you'd know them, Todd, that just make sandwiches and salad bars.
Yeah, or like a pay by the pound salad
Exactly.
bar. Yeah.
But there are a couple sandwich places that are really good. And there's one, just on the other side of Lafayette Square that roasted a couple turkeys every day and made turkey sandwiches. And if I had, again, 45 minutes to get away from my desk for lunch, that was a pretty good option.
Okay, the White House similarly can issue you a magic wand just to use for work and learn something that you can't otherwise, right? So you get this data, you get these reports, you talk to people, but like there's still something you're missing. But now with this magic wand, you can know that thing. What's the one thing you're going to use it?
What would make me a good economist? I don't know, maybe some machine learning skills or something like that.
I would have used the wand for understanding true preferences. So the large language model doesn't get me closer to why did you make that decision? The true why.
Yeah, if I could know things.
Or maybe you could learn.
If you really want to be powerful, if you want to go to Washington and sort of wield power, it's not clear economics is the tool. I think it's law, probably. It seems like lawyers are the ones that pull the levers more than economists, unfortunately for us.
Okay, so I'm not legally telling you that you could do this or should do this.
Good caveat.
If they were going to close the CEA, it's done forever. But they're going to let all former CEA employees come in and grab one thing to take as a souvenir to have in your house. What are you taking? From the White House or CEA stuff? What would be your memento?
So the White House had these umbrellas that would stand at the doorway of the executive office building facing the West Wing. So if it were raining and you had to go to the White,
You don't want to get your suit wet.
you grab an umbrella, and they're like very nice White House umbrellas. And I almost thought I should just grab one and keep walking and take it with me. And I never did. And now I wish I had.
Oh, that's a good one.
Man, I feel like now we know what to get Joe.
Oh, that's true. Now I know the perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually bought a White House umbrella from the gift shop. There's a gift shop in the executive office building. But it's just not the same, right? It's
You wanted one of the used ones, one with history.
like the real ones.
Yeah.
Having a black market
This
umbrella
This could have been used to cover the hair of named dignitary who came through the White House when it was raining one day.
right?
Well, Joe, thank you for being
Yeah,
so
thanks,
generous
Joe.
with your time. We learned a bunch.
It was good to talk to you. Thanks, you.
Thank you again for listening to our conversation series here on the AgCast. I hope you learned a lot about the White House and economic policy in the agriculture sector from the perspective of the Council of Economic Advisors, a group that some of you maybe have never heard of before.
It's another opportunity for people with a PhD in economics. Joe talks about the people who are doing the analysis and then bringing it to Joe to sort of sign off. Those are all people with a master's in economics. So this is also an interesting alternative career path.
It's an interesting mix of people that are on it for a very long time. That's their career. Or you have people that sort of come in for a season or for a brief period based on the information needs of the White House at the time.
We should also remind listeners that we have that great podcast with Nate Kaufman, the Kansas City Fed. If you haven't listened to that one, it's really good. And then that one was followed by
Oh, that was Brant. We talked about ag
That's
tech.
right,
We
yeah.
got the chance to really find out what the heck actually is ag tech.
Which I think we ended up with more questions than answers.
Yeah, I know, but like I now feel like ag tech to me feels like a real thing. Where before it was always just like someday this could happen, right? There's like science fiction, but he shows like no, it's science. Like it actually exists. And so that was interesting. And then we had Joe Suttles on to talk about large scale investments in the ag sector, which is a follow-up from a conversation we had with Kyle Maple and Pete Trost, which is also on a previous podcast. They also kind of work in that world.
One of the things about Joe, because I've been thinking about the conversation we had with Joe, is he's real practical, right? Like he's trying to make stuff work. We're talking about investment at a high level, but then he's also the guy that just has to make things work and stand between money and practicality.
Yeah, and trying to get, I don't know how long people can use the analogy of green acres till it's just outdated, but it's like you're trying to talk to both Wall Street and farmers and get them to understand each other.
Is that the premise of Green Acres?
The Green Acres was like, it's this rich city dude that buys a farm and it's like fish out of water. But
Okay,
the opposite, right?
right.
Where you get this sort of like country guy and now he's living in with the high society.
I kind of feel like that's what I'm living.
Yeah, except you're not a hillbilly. It's flat as a pancake where you're
That's
from, right?
true.
No, I think you would be a hayseed or a hick.
Yeah.
I don't know which one of these are offensive, but I feel like hillbilly to me, and now that's because I'm from the Ozarks, hillbilly implies topological variation.
Yeah.
But I guess you could be a Midwestern redneck. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, according to Jeff Foxworthy, anybody can be a redneck.
Yeah.
Right? It just matters
It's
like
true.
how you use the high dive. If you think we could learn from you and you happen to be coming through Purdue, let us know because we would love to learn more. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and come back next month.